And so now, without too much further ado, I'm going to call Marcus back because I want to talk to him about a bunch of things. And here we go. Let's get it going on with Marcus. He's on the line. I can't wait to talk to this guy. He's a comedian also, so that's always fun. That's always fun when you know a guy who's a comic and he's got a different thing going on now. Now, where are we here? Ringity ring, ring, ring.
Good morning.
Good morning, and it's good morning in Vancouver and good afternoon in Toronto. We are on the line with Marcus Rummery, broadcasting to you from 234 King Street East, the fantastic Pacific Junction Hotel, where they make food that tastes good, and they have liquids that are fun to drink. I mean, what else do you want, really? And then we have this broadcasting booth in here. So that's where we're coming from. This is a eggplant digital media creation. And let's create some times with Marcus Rummery, the author. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
On
Can
being
you get
an
an immoral sandwich at the Queen Elizabeth, though? I'd like to try that.
It is a good one. It is a good one. It is. Everybody can understand. Everybody has a little piece of that one.
Sure.
You know, the immoral sandwich. It doesn't really matter anymore, I guess. So listen, I want to tell everybody, this is a gentleman here who's he's slightly younger than me. I'm not going to tip the hand here. Listen to this lovely thing he wrote in the book that he sent me. And also, I'm gonna say that we're gonna be giving away some other books. So maybe Kim will talk to Marcus later. But this week we're also gonna give away a Dr. Sam Malachi book. So sorry to use your time to sell Sam's great cannabis conspiracy book. I'm a little scattershot this week.
I'm happy to sell Sam's book.
Okay, you should be, and we'll get to that. Let me just clear some mess out of the way here. This is the Shamanic Graffiti book, 100,000 Years of Drugs. I love the way you just said the word drugs right in the title. And 100 Years of Prohibition. That's the book. Look at this. I got bookmarks all over the place. But you don't have this copy. Listen to this. Alan, before the Late Show one night, so this is stand-up comedy someplace, folks, because we're comics. And like I said, I'm older, probably started earlier than Marcus. Before the Late Show one night, you told me to knock it out of the park. He puts it in quotes. Here is my attempt. Thanks for your encouragement and heart. All good things. Now listen, here's the great thing about this. I never do this, pat myself on the back. I honestly don't remember when this happened, Marcus. But I'm glad to read I got a good report. It wasn't some other thing you were saying. So when did that take place? Was this in Toronto or was I out west?
This was Ottawa.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, that's where I started with Howie Wagman.
Right, the old Wagster. Yeah. He's not that old, but I have to throw that in there. That's right. So, and you did well. You did well, as I recall. You had a good set.
I think so.
I think so. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, I don't remember you having a bad set. Put it that way. But
no, you would if you had said that and I had a bad set, that would have been more memorable and funnier, really.
It would have been more ultimately worthwhile as a comedic thing, but it's a nice thing. So, thanks for writing that in there. That was really nice to read.
Well, I appreciated the compliment and the encouragement in a very competitive, bone-crushing business.
You know, I'm just sick and tired of contests and all that kind of thing. Look, what's your favorite comic? You know, it's so different. You know, are you really going to tell me that, Dave Chappelle is better than Seinfeld, is better than, Robin Williams is better than, there's just, like, why limit yourself? What's your favorite thing at a buffet? Does that really need to happen? So
the Western mind categorizes everything.
Yeah, and we're the best at doing that, by the way. The Western mind is the best, and so down it goes.
Crush the competition.
Absolutely crush it. So let's tell.
It's the same with cannabis. There's the spiritual, the recreational, and the medicinal, and they're hard to delineate and decipher.
Well, you can't do that. Everybody tries, but there's no point doing that.
I think it's teaching us something with that.
Yeah. I think it's teaching us a lot of things. So here's what we're going to do. I want to tell people who you are a little bit first, because, we've been Facebook friends for a long time, but I didn't know you were diving into becoming an author, and this is a very envy-inspiring task you've taken on, because I'd like to write a book. You've written a book, and I just want to hear, like, what is your transition? You're a comedian, so I saw you in Ottawa, and I was encouraging your stand-up, and now you're telling me thanks for the encouragement. I wrote a book on psychopharmacopoeia. So that's not exactly what I meant that night. I just meant, get up there and tell a bunch of jokes.
And now you tell me.
And now you've turned it into this great, I'm so glad that with these few words I was able to inspire such a great work by yourself. That's so cool. So,
Well, just inspiring a work ethic in general.
yeah. So tell the folks, you know, a little bit of the truth. I mean, you know, let's say you were some guy, you got into comedy. Now, you didn't have this psychonaut desire to categorize these things yet at that time, did you? Or have you always
Shortly
been?
after I started stand-up, I had experience in 1995 on mushrooms and an antidepressant called dizipramine, and it was a full-on rebirth kind of event, and it inspired me to start researching. And I had an internet connection in Carleton University Library, and that's where it started. And I started doing stand-up a year later.
Oh, okay. Well, so you
And
were
then
already on some kind of pharmaceutical?
I was at the time. I had this mushroom experience that I think it somehow influenced the course of the events. Normally, you would dissociate under extreme stress like that, but I have a feeling that the dizipramine prevented that from happening. And I talk about that. I go into the details of it, but I had a lot of depression and trauma and so on. And so my reaction to mushrooms was explosive, and I had this incredible, epic decompression that came out of it. And I realized when I read Stanislav Grof's work that he was facilitating these experiences in his studies.
Okay, let's just go back a little bit to this. Okay, so you had already taken mushrooms for whatever reason prior to this.
Who's Your Daddy was the party. It was the most trivial enterprise you can imagine. Going to a party called Who's Your Daddy? Yeah.
You went to a party called Who's Your Daddy? Yeah. So, so when you're taking this what was it called? Dizipramine, or what was it called?
Dizipramine.
Dizipramine. Okay, so you were taking that for some time, and then you took you've okay. So here's what I'm trying to say. At one time in your life, you were a fella who wound up doing mushrooms, so you know what that's like on its own. Then later on, for this depression, you were on this strangely unpronounceable drug for me right now, and you took that for a while, and then while you were on the course of that, you took mushrooms again, and this was a different mushroom trip than the other times when you had not mixed it.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say why it specifically transpired the way it did. Before we went to the party, my friend had stolen an Omni magazine. And there was an article in there by Albert Hoffman about how promising LSD was in the treatment of alcoholism and depression. So that was a kind of a synchronistic event that occurred right before I had this breakthrough.
Was it really synchronistic, or was it just waiting for you the whole time?
Well, it feels very synchronistic.
Yeah. I think when a lot of those things happen, I'm making fun of that notion right there with that particular voice, but I'm making fun of it. But I also happen to see that it comes in cycles, that I get grounded sometimes and in a certain place, and I haven't been that way for a couple of weeks, and it's super frustrating. But when a lot of coincidences and timing issues, I mean, I was into a stretch there for a while with some heated revelations and all kinds of psychonaut revelations where stuff was happening like a sitcom. Like as soon as you would put the phone down, there was a knock at the door, you know. It's like, then you got to go to the door. As soon as you put that down, then the phone goes off. You have to call someone else. And the timing of a lot of these things was, you know, ridiculous compared to usual. But so you realized during this, I'm already on this depresone thing or whatever, and you take the mushrooms. You had a what was so different about this particular journey that caused you to go, wow, that was incredible, I better research this this approach?
Well, to back up a little bit, a year prior, I was taking to complicate it a little bit more, but in terms of understanding the context, it's kind of essential. Because so a year before I took Prozac, and I went to see an ex-girlfriend, and it was a very neurotic ex-girlfriend situation. And I was new to smoking cannabis at the time, and I had some BC weed, which is why I later would move out here. But at the time, it provoked a massive panic attack. And I got quite depressed. I lost a lot of weight. I got really bad psoriasis. It was not a good situation. I dropped out of school. And then a year later, I was taking dizipramine and had this mushroom trip. And this time, the panic built and built and built, whereas before, the body would become exhausted, and then it would kind of reset. Whereas with this, it wasn't doing that. It continued to accelerate and intensify until it reached a self-organizing critical state, is how it's described in the research, I guess. And I was transformed.
A self-organizing critical state. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
That's the term, huh? Okay, so what does that mean, sir? A
Well, in
self-organizing...
a complex system, if you drive novelty high enough, eventually it reaches a self-organizing critical state, and it's a different kind of intelligence that can be accessed.
Okay, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And does that happen? Does that happen strictly as the result of a chemical interaction?
Well, it happens in minor ways all the time, but to have a massive breakthrough like that requires the defenses that would prevent it from happening are somehow undermined.
So was it like an explosion? I mean, you're freaking out, you're going nuts, it's getting terrible, and then all of a sudden you figured everything out. Is that what you mean? Or?
I wouldn't. It wasn't a cognition. It wasn't an idea that I came to. It was an experience or a feeling. It was like some sort of mathematical process ran its course. That's the perception I had. Wow. But I'm not coming from life from a religious background. I'm coming at it from a math and science. I was raised next to a nuclear research facility, so I just looked at it in terms of biology and mathematics, and other people would use better metaphors that might be better, or different metaphors, sorry, like religious metaphors and so on.
Right. Well, we get lots of those. That's okay. I like yours.
Yeah.
So now you've experienced this, and you start to research it, and your research was showing you, yeah, if you mix these two together, then you can. Is that the path that you use to become intelligent enough to write this book?
They hadn't mixed the two together. That was just my experience. That they never, dizipramine and antidepressants and psychedelics have not been used together at all.
Right.
They're considered contraindicated. I think with the research now, they're so careful that they're not taking any chances whatsoever. But there can be interactions. But they did sometimes use methamphetamine with LSD psychotherapy or Ritalin with LSD psychotherapy. But generally, it was just LSD. In the case of Hollywood Hospital, it was LSD and mescaline.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to Hollywood Hospital for sure. Yeah, so then, and did this, so you were rolling with this for a while before you started doing comedy?
Yeah, this had happened exactly a year before. I don't know that I would have had the courage to deal with the terror of
of getting on stage.
Yeah, it's brutal. So I don't know if I think it gave me a little bit of confidence.
Well, a lot of people, I think you could have gotten up there. I got to take umbrage with something. Most of the guests on this show completely agree with me all the time about everything. You're going to be the guy I got to disagree with. That's not even, listen, that's not something you need to worry about. All right, so here we are I want to touch on a few things that you spoke about because From this preface of the book and the introduction of the book, you set out a really fantastic tone. Folks, you really want to check this out. Support a Canadian author, for starters, whether you're Canadian or not. Shamanic Graffiti. And we'll get to Frank Ogden shortly. But listen to this. In the preface, I wanted to do a book once that had like a preface and an introduction and a primer and you're halfway through before chapter 1 starts. But anyway, at the end of this preface, it says, I believe, this is you speaking here, sir, I believe that in 10 to 20 years, all around the world, in universities, hospitals, and specialized clinics, neuronauts will take a range of psychedelic medicines about 1 to 10 times over 6 months with a male and female therapist. And over the next 200-plus pages, I will make my case and hopefully build a bridge from my vision of the future. So your vision of the future, Marcus, to fast forward, I mean, this is the end of the preface, but it's the end of your thesis. And a lot of other words with S in it. Ethos, system. There's two in there. There's two in system. So over the next 200 pages, you want to make the case that in 10 to 20 years, and I won't even hold you to the 10 years. Let's go to 20. All around the world in universities, hospitals, and clinics, neuronauts will take a range of psychedelic medicines for about 1 to 10 times over 6 months with a male and female therapist. So what you're saying is, or not, what you're trying to tell me here is that you see we are now struggling just with fighting to get cannabis accessible for people, with a lot of other paranoid people upset about it. But you're saying, never mind all that, we're going to be down into this other stuff for the next 10, like talking acid and mushrooms and everything else. And this is going to help us.
MDMA and psilocybin are on track to be prescription medicines in 2021.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. MDMA has been given breakthrough status for post-traumatic stress disorder in the United States, and there's research going on here in Vancouver. And ketamine for depression. There's 12 specialized clinics in the United States that give you 6 infusions of ketamine. It's quite effective for treatment-resistant depression. It can save a lot of lives.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so and the therapist would be the practitioner, the doctor, or whatever. Like in a shamanic setting, it's the shaman or the ayahuasqueros or whatever that make sure everything's okay. All right, well that's great. Let's see also from the book. We want you to talk about the Hollywood Sanitarium. I used to walk by that place all the time when I lived there. But here's something. It says here, the second most important event was being sexually abused as a child. Trauma primed me for an explosive reaction to psychedelics that reverberates to this day. Depression and alcoholism are overrepresented on my family tree, and when a sensitive nervous system meets a vicious and uncompromising world, an angry, ruthless suffering is the result. Not that my life has been a miserable one, for as I would ultimately learn, it was in the misery itself where the mystery of transformation lay. This is another version of the answer to your problem is in the problem.
Yes, for sure. Every problem contains its own solution. King Arthur, when the knights went to find the Grail, he told them to go to the darkest part of the forest.
Mm-hmm. I've been finding that out a lot of times in other ways as well. So this was a realization that came to you with the use of this stuff. Like you would say that since you've been using this, you're able to compare your brain usage, say before how you used it and now how you're using it to obtain things. Like you weren't writing a book in 2003.
No, but I came across an excellent opportunity. It was more about that. When I met Frank, I had the chance and I had the files.
Right. Okay. One more thing from here is I really wanted to talk about this and just share your go to the outer reaches of your descriptive abilities, if you will, to talk about this. Regarding the use of this stuff, it says, whether communist or capitalist, Christian or Muslim, no power structure embraces psychedelics, possibly because their use seems to dissolve structure. Just talk about that for a little bit. What kind of structure are you talking about? The following the orders kind of laws and rules in the written books of the religions?
Cultural operating systems. There's the Timothy Leary's 8-circuit model, which says that the brain is imprinted, and you get a reality tunnel, and then you can only adjust it very mildly from there, and that's why people are so ideological and emotional and irrational. Wow. So I think that psychedelics facilitate a state of unconditioned consciousness, where you can transcend those imprints, at least for a little while, and possibly facilitate new ones. I mean, this is all very early stages.
Yeah, but you're down the road on it. I mean, you've been doing the work. You've been going right down into this. That most of them gained over the years. Many Zen monks realized most of them had gained their first view of the spiritual path while on psychedelic drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always been interesting to me that this topic, this particular topic, is so. It just seems so much like the Wizard of Oz, in that you're not supposed to know everything. Just take this part and run with this. You don't really need to know that. And if I'm going to teach you all these things about my religion, and you're going to come to my church every Sunday, and then you start to get these different insights available from this plant or whatever growing in the ground or something, that's not cool for them.
Mm-hmm. And it tends not to be.
Yeah,
it's unpredictable.
Unpredictable. I think so much of it has to do with, it's definitely tied to the laws.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
There are people connected to the laws and connected to these beliefs. Like if everybody knows everything you know and we're able to write in that book, how governable are we as a society?
That's quite a question. It depends on how many amoral, immoral sandwiches we're having.
Toasted or grilled?
But Rick Doblin, the president of MAPS, Multiple Disciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, who has really done a lot, says the slogan is tune in, turn on, and go to the bake sale.
Turn in, tune on, and go to the bake sale.
Yeah, so his contention is that psychedelics can be integrated seamlessly into mainstream society. And as far as psychedelic therapy goes, I think that's probably basically true.
Right. Huh. Okay, so you also work. I'm going to get back to the book in a minute. I want to talk about Frank Ogden and remind everybody who he is. But
sure.
I just want to mention to everybody, too, that Mark has contacted me one day with a fascinating multi-pointed email that said, or a text rather, whatever it was, that said that you were working at you work at a place that also, you're at this end of the deal with the book, and we're going to spend most of the time there, but you're also working at an opioid what do you call it? What's the name of it?
Opioid substitution program. Opiate substitution program with Eden Medicinals.
Eden Medicinals. Okay, great.
Yeah, we're giving capsules to on the downtown east side to people with opiate or other drug addictions or pain problems.
Right, and they
for free.
For free, they just walk in and say, "Gee whiz, I'm on opiates. Can you help me out?"
Yep.
And what kind of thing do you provide, or what's made available for them?
It's 25 milligram full spectrum THC with medium chain triglyceride coconut oil for absorption.
Oh, nice.
And we're doing a study with UBC, and we're working with StatsCan, and basically we give them the capsules and they give us the data.
Okay. That's great. And tell us, while we're on the subject, I know a little bit about this, but since we're here, and I didn't plan to talk about it, what's the deal with the synergy between the alleged synergy or the actual synergy between mixing the coconut oil with the cannabis? What does the coconut oil bring to it?
I don't know exactly how it works, but I think cannabis isn't very bioavailable orally.
Okay.
So if you add the apparently medium chain triglycerides specifically, it gets into the stomach more, and you don't lose as much of it.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so Frank Ogden is a much older man than you. Tell us about how you met him. Tell everybody who he is, and describe a little bit about how you guys put this book together.
It's hard to describe Frank Ogden, but he also was a futurist under the name Dr. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
He served in World War II as a flight engineer. He became a pilot. He owned a company that sold small airplanes, and then he read about LSD and sold his business and moved to Vancouver and said, "I'll work free for you for a couple of weeks and then see if you could afford me." And he became the resident therapist for 5 years, at the big 5 years at Hollywood Hospital when they were quite busy.
Wow. A resident therapist at Hollywood Hospital. Okay, that was on New West, right? New West.
Yep.
Yeah. So
6th and 6th.
6th and 6th. So tell us about that place. That was one of those creepy. I'm sure they used it in a lot of movies for all kinds of things.
Yeah, it was an old house that was converted into a private psychiatric hospital. And Ross McLean, who owned it, screened in a porch and made a clinic specifically for LSD mescaline therapy, which wasn't really uncommon at the time. There was a mental hospital in Britain that was built specifically for LSD therapy. Stanislav Grof in Prague had a 17-bed locked wards exclusively devoted to LSD therapy in 1967.
Wow.
But Hollywood Hospital had one too, and this was a private clinic. I don't know of any other ones where it was a business.
Right, and you said they were doing well as doing the societal great fantastic function of helping people out.
Mm-hmm.
They were also financially profiting.
They were making a lot of money. It was about $3,000 a session in our dollars. The subsequent sessions were half as much.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. So, where are you now with your practice? You're not a doctor, but what's your regular, at the risk of using a doctor word, practice of, like, what is your practice of using these items?
I do every 3 months before the solstice and equinox. I cleanse for the Monday till the Saturday, and then I get up and I'm a hot yoga teacher, so I usually do some hot yoga or some yoga, and then I trip on like not necessarily micro doses, but very, very low doses.
Right.
of various legal
low,
entheogens.
How do you do that? You take a little tiny hit of acid and you have like a razor blade and some telescopic eyewear or something, or how do you microscopic eyewear?
It doesn't literally have to be microscopic to be a microdose. It's just a low dose.
Okay.
Just to cut off a sliver.
Cut off a sliver. And how do you find, because I've microdosed only with other substances such as mushroom. I've never microdosed. I haven't even done LSD in quite some time. Like a week and a half or something. No, I'm just kidding. I haven't done it for years and years.
Yeah,
and I'm not, it's everybody's own thing or whatever. But I haven't done it in such a long time. But I've microdosed with mushrooms to what I found was a successful approach for depression. And what I basically did was I took a gram of mushroom, which would normally not be enough if you wanted to have a good old time. You might want at least 1.5 grams. And then on up to the the heroic dose, but what I was using was 1/10 of 1 gram, and basically cutting it up with an X-Acto knife, which I obviously didn't fly into the country, and I used it to be able to cut it into 10 pieces, and I can assure you there is absolutely no psychoactivity from this tiny little dose whatsoever. 10 doses out of 1 gram, but it did help kind of lift the fog. After 3 or 4 days, you start to feel like, it's still doing something. It's just, you're not tripping out, but it's doing something. So
I feel microdosing feels like antidepressants to me. There's like a basic bioamine surge that comes from that. It's quite useful.
So
quite enjoyable.
When you take acid, though, in the same way with these microdoses, do you feel any of the psychoactivity, or is it just?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You do.
I'm so sensitive to it because my body is empty basically. So it's a high enough dose that it's psychoactive, and then I do psychedelic prayers by Timothy Leary, which is based on the Book of Changes by Lao Tzu. So I've done this now 51 times.
What does that mean? 51.
Since 2004, before each equinox and solstice, this now adds up to 51. This will be my 52nd time, and it's coming up in a few days.
Oh my God! I hope I'm not making you eat something right now and blowing your regimen. No.
Well, I'm gonna have to cleanse from amoral sandwiches at least.
I guess so. Yeah. I'm never gonna live that one down.
Well, that's precisely what it is, though. It's a perfect description.
Okay, so I just was curious because with the mushroom doses so low, like I'm pretty sure that if I were going to try this, what you're doing, I would have to be, I'd have to have a schedule blocked off. Like here's 3 days where nothing's going on. Yeah, and that's been a bit.
You want to. Well, at the very least, you definitely have to have one day that you're late, or at least one afternoon.
Yeah, blocked off that you could just go, oh, that's a slight. I remember what acid is like. I'm sure when it started to come up again, it's like, oh yeah, this again. But you don't get as high, right? You're just not. No. But so when you're in that state, just let's call it just perched on the edge of the acid psychoactive zone, the state of being that you're in there. Dialing it down to such a low measure. I mean, you can be seeing all kinds of things and hallucinating like crazy and imagining things, but you're basically functioning in the world, in the society, okay with just this little sliver. But you're still running all the data that you're taking in through through coming up on that small dose. And I'm fascinated how that feels. I guess I have to try to do it, but to be able to make those decisions, like, are you hopping on the bus and what are you doing down there?
No, I'm not hopping on the bus. I actually now I have a projector, so I watch fractals and listen to Lao Tzu's thoughts, and but I don't ride the bus. Try to stay in.
Keeping off that Hastings thing for your acid trips.
But this year it's St. Paddy's Day, so I'll break my cleanse by going to see a Pogues cover band called Shane's Teeth.
Oh, that's cool, in Vancouver somewhere.
Yeah, Wise Hall in Vancouver. Yeah,
that sounds good. So when you were writing the book, were you partaking of it? Did you try any of the actual writing of the book while you were on the substances?
If you write sober, edit high. If you write high, edit sober. I tend to like to get both.
So you hit it from both ends, and you have to alternate chapters to do that and really see how it turns.
No, you don't do that. You want to go over. I think in Greece in the parliament they used to look at each piece of legislation drunk and then sober.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. I think they allowed austerity to come at them while they were drunk then. Hey, I wanted to bounce this thing off. I was going to get it into the news earlier, but I wanted to get your take on this too. This is kind of fascinating. Back to the cannabis thing quickly. You recall this will be of interest to our British listeners. Thanks for listening over there in the. Is it still Great Britain? Is that what they call it? Anyway, Grenfell survivor. You know the tower that burned last year. There was a tower that caught on fire in London and collapsed to the ground. And apparently they didn't use the right cladding. They rushed the job. It was substandard across the board in so many ways, apparently, in the actual construction of the thing and the practices that they used to keep it safe. And none of these guys have been, and by that I mean the architects, the city engineers, anybody that passed the permit that allowed for the creation of this, basically a death trap where so many people were killed in this fire. Jesus. And here we are almost pretty much a year later, and this is on Russia Today, or what they call RT.com, but it's still a real story, everybody. Try to get yourself together there with that fake news thing. I think RT covers everything else really well, and they're terrible about Russian politics. And then and then in the States, it's the other way around. You know, they talk about the States and they don't know what they're talking about, and they ignore everything else in the world. But it says here the Grenfell survivor. A survivor of this disaster was arrested after a cannabis oil factory was found in his particular area of the tower. How about that? A blaze survivor faces jail after a cannabis oil factory was found in the wreckage of the 24-story building. He'd produced, and this is funny to me, he produced enough cannabis oil to last one user 140 days. But then later on, their numbers are kind of skewed, and that's not really what it is.
They always get those numbers wrong. They just inflate them. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But this whole story focuses on the fact that the magistrates heard that the store of cannabis cuttings and the butane gas canisters found in the 35-year-old's flat were but they never say that this is what caused the fire and that this is the inferno that killed 71 people and leaving hundreds homeless. Yeah. And they haven't busted anybody in the way of there were so many problems with it a year ago. We were hearing so much about it. Now this one guy they really like to demonize cannabis across the board. So now we're getting back to your book in that talk about this thing called anecdotal, like it's a weapon.
Yeah.
And it's only anecdotal. The stuff that you write in your book, the things that are in here, I'm sure anybody of official capacity would be happy to call it anecdotal. But like the whole thing is anecdotal. But they're able to, and when I say they, the powers that be, they'll put something on display as, look how dangerous this is. Here's a boy whose mother came home and she bought this thing and something happened and they put this giant construct together and that's why this thing's illegal. But when people have stories like the one I have and what you've been able to learn, it's this big problem and it's all it's just a cockamamie wives' tale. So they get to flip that around all the time. How do you deal with that? I mean, I think about it all the time. Do you just let it roll off your back?
Well, I mean, in the case of psychedelic medicine, the solution is to do methodologically sound experiments that follow all those rules. Because in the 60s, a lot of the therapists didn't want to bother with that stuff, and we know it works, and they're very kind of touchy-feely Jungian or even Freudian types.
Yeah.
And they said we're not going to do it like that, and that was a mistake, a big mistake. And now it's all done with placebos and independent raters and controls. Yeah. It's not anecdote; it's data. That way.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to do it. I don't know how to exactly move my own, other than just, I'm gathering and collating all of the doctor, basically like everything I got from the hospital or a doctor. It's just one after the other in a binder and sort of drawing the story out from there.
Well, people are skeptical.
Oh God, yeah, they should be skeptical, but when you
Yeah.
really hit them with a lot of things, they're still skeptical.
But even with your story, people are skeptical. And
Oh,
it's,
I don't blame them for that. I
Yeah.
don't blame people for that. I used to, I used to blame them when I was new at this. When I was a cannabis comedy virgin, um, uh, when I got going on it, because I just thought, look, I was so screwed. Now I'm doing great. What's the matter with you? Why don't you see this? Then I realized, most people didn't see the transition from myself being relatively healthy, super healthy actually, down into this nadir of existence and then back up again. And it's an unlikely story. I know that. I know all the reasons why you would think it's ridiculous and hard to believe, and that's totally fine. I get it. The folks that are open though are benefiting from it, and those are the three cuts of people, and you like that too. It's like there's the lower people at the lower end of the spectrum, let's call it. I don't mean that as an insult, but just three bands of folks, and the biggest band is the band at the bottom. They don't want to hear it, they don't believe it. It's nonsense and ridiculous, and my hair's too long, and that's that. Then there's the folks at the top that I would say, such as you already know, you already get it, you're already aware of these things, and I'm preaching to the choir in that sense. I'm trying to talk to the folks in the middle who are open enough to realize, okay, I've done this and that and the other thing, and I'm not getting a result, and I've helped a lot of people in that category. That's where I've been able to bring most of my worth, and I'm not trying to chase the majority of folks who are never going to believe it. I just I'm kind of tired of speaking with them, but.
Do they still get conventional treatments in addition to the cannabis oil?
Some people do. Yeah. I mean, it just depends on the person. I mean, I know that I doubled down. When they told me about it at the beginning, I'm getting on the cannabis train, absolutely. But when they told me there was no other application available, not that I wanted chemo, but they said it was too far out to get that, and it wasn't going to do anything. And the same with radiation and surgery, and just take these pills, And so I didn't like that too much. But then there was this one, I talked about it earlier in the show, this testosterone suppressant. I took that, for a few months. And then I thought, oh, this is terrible. But I doubled down on it. And later, a couple of years later, I took a shot of radiation to the back because things were so crazy at that point. But that was after a bad period of bad weed and a crash back in the hospital. But I just... I'm not going to ever try to, as soon as I realize, look, this is already bloody unlikely across the board. Why expect everyone to totally understand it and get it? I just hope the people that really need it are open enough to try it out.
Well, it's bona fide in terms of clinical research that shows that when the THC binds to these receptors, the tumor produces ceramide and it engulfs the disease cell and leaves the healthy ones intact. I mean, we know that's true. Whether it's going to be strong enough to cure an actual cancer is a different story.
Right. It does seem to be. It does seem to vary, and it does seem to be. However, there's so many factors that haven't been quantified. This is what I would love to do, to be able to feel comfortable enough to write any kind of book. I would need to know. There are certain people like me who never had all of that chemo stuff and were only using the cannabis and also, in my case, this testosterone suppressant. Then there are people who they've done everything, and they do the cannabis later on after everything seems to have failed. And they go, oh, okay, I'll try it, and then maybe that doesn't work either because by that time you're so riddled. It's hard to say. So you can't say, oh, cannabis didn't work for that guy, but it did work for that guy. Maybe I had a cleaner slate for the good green to come in the first place. It's
tough to put people into placebo groups when it's cancer too. I mean, I'm sure they do, but sorry.
That's going to be
the dummy pill.
A great understatement on a T-shirt. I don't want to sit on the bus wearing that. It's probably inflammatory, but oh God. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring that Grenfell survivor thing because we are also speaking to folks in England, and this is a propaganda going on. I think there's not one thing in there where they're alleging that this guy caused the fire, and they're not going after the folks that did cause the fire. The shoddy
British have an obsession with skunk.
Yes,
they're always going on about skunk, and it's just a kind of a slang term for sensimilia that comes out of Holland and something and. they're 90% of the weed is skunk.
Are you up on what's going on with them right now? And I was going to talk about this as well today, so I might as well bring it in with you because this is,
Sure.
you know, from the Telegraph and many other publications, I might add, including Nova Ordem News, greenpassion.org, thetelegraph.co for mainstream, et cetera, et cetera. And what they have here is the story on almost all cannabis on Britain's streets is super strength and could be driving mental health problems.
Yeah.
This is a big story right now. And they say that most of the cannabis in Britain is now skunk. That could be fueling the rise in mental health problems, they say. Researchers at King's College London tested almost 1,000 police seizures from Kent, Derbyshire, Merseyside, Sussex, and found 94% were dangerously high. In 2005, just 51% of cannabis sold was also skunk. Yeah, so there's been a big increase. Are people really going to be going insane, Marcus? Is that what's happening?
Well, that argument is undermined by the fact that when cannabis use went up 30 times in the 1950s, schizophrenia did not go up at all. So and you know, same with IQ. IQs are going up, but as cannabis goes up, it's not going down. So I think it can trigger and exacerbate certain kinds of mental illness.
Right. So wouldn't it be the case that you know, if you had a child that had a peanut butter sandwich and then started to lose his ability to breathe, maybe you've just found out that your kid is peanut sensitive. You know, like a lactose intolerant kid or a peanut kind of thing.
Sure.
And it's the same. I think it could be very much. I don't see this proposition anywhere. But how about the fact that some people, for whatever reason, and there may be more than one reason, it affects their personal hardwiring in a negative way. And when you find that out, you just don't get to have that thing. You know, like some people can't have wheat.
Sure. But a lot of people who are have psychosis aggravated by cannabis want to keep smoking cannabis, which is kind of peculiar. But also CBD has been proven now a couple of times over to be an antipsychotic, just as good as the antipsychotics out there are really hard on you. But you have to take 600 to 800 milligrams. Right? In the studies, they're taking 600. That would cost you like hundreds of dollars a day right now.
Oh, I can't do it. I can't do that. So yeah. So the CBD, that's what they say. I lost my thread there. The antipsychotic. That's what I wanted to talk about.
Antipsychotic, yeah.
What is that? I mean, I guess it's going to take you off of your high, but what kind? Is that a drug also? I guess some kind of
CBD is one of the cannabinoids. There's the main ones are THC and CBD.
Right, and that's going to take you off of your.
Yeah, it's for some reason we don't really know very much about how it works. It works on many different systems, but for some reason it's takes away the voices and all that stuff.
The voices. Yeah, so I'm sorry I'm laughing, folks. I probably shouldn't be doing the show today. I'm laughing at somebody's terrible situation right now. I don't mean to do that, but come on, the voices. So yeah. you heard the voices?
I never heard the voices.
You never heard the voices? Okay.
But apparently smoking weed lowers IQs and causes hallucinations. So not only do you hear voices, but they're fucking morons.
Oh, God. That's
working on a bit there.
Yeah, working on a bit. Yeah, I know. That's okay. You know, why wouldn't they be, right? Like, especially if they're the entities of people that have lived and died. I mean, mostly we're dealing with morons most of the time anyway. So probably a good chance that the folks that are pestering, you know, why do we always assume these fuckers always have access to the truth and use it all the time, right?
Sure.
This netherworld gang of freaks, they're probably just, you know, they're just having fun with us. Anyway.
Who knows?
Let's get back.
But serene psychotics are the serene psychotics are supposedly the most enlightened.
Serene psychotics?
People. Yeah, they're hearing voices and they're hallucinating and they're having delusions, but they're totally content.
Well, that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a sign of enlightenment.
That's a sign of enlightenment. You know, it's like having your own GPS all the time about everything, all the time. You know, I think I'll have that sandwich over there. No, don't have that sandwich. Have the amoral immoral sandwich.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. It's, it's like you get the two things on your shoulder. Okay, you know, if you think of anything you want to say at any time, please jump in. I always say that to every guest because this is a discussion.
Now you tell me.
Yeah, sure. I want you to. I thought it was inherently available that this knowledge.
I got it.
Okay, so my quick question, we'll dive to something else after this, is that are we going to see, what are we going to see in the wave of this super strength skunk weed in Britain and everyone's going crazy? Is this you know, Reefer Madness 2018?
Exactly what it is. It's a tabloid scare story. But the British are obsessed with madness. It's what makes them so interesting.
That is such a great racist shot. You know, and you can get away with it too because number one, it's funny, and I'm of British extraction, so that's the one group I can hammer on, and that's so funny. So they have an obsession. Yeah, sure, they've got those ancient asylums and things, and
oh yeah, Bedlam.
Those old terrible places.
Those make you want to go crazy though to stay in this amazing Victorian mansion and walk around the fields and romantic.
You think Probably the Queen ever wraps her lips around a bong? You ever think they just
Queen Victoria took cannabis tincture for menstrual cramps.
Oh, now I'm gonna have to give you a ding right there. You can't put Queen Victoria and menstrual cramp in the same sentence. Mate, if somebody's eating lunch right now. It's not even a fair shot.
She is my erotic obsession and always has. Because it's all about puritanism, and that just makes it very sexy to me.
I always thought as a kid, I couldn't believe that there was a succession of others to come out of that particular portal of entry into this ether. I just couldn't believe it. Her face looks like it looks like one of those hams you buy, you know, that are, it's just the perfect shape with the string holding it tight and everything. Now I'm saying something offensive about a woman, so I'm going to be getting some kind of hate mail over this, even though she's worthy of reprehension. Listen,
as long as you get some kind of mail, that's what I see it.
You get exactly. Every kind of mail is some kind of mail, or whatever Gene Simmons said. So while all this is going on, you're writing this book. Now, I want to know what your plans are. I want to get back to this thing about how it's going to be in the future. Like, how do you see things going? Let's try to rein this thing in. I'm having so much fun. But why don't we talk about this? That society right now is riddled with people in almost all jurisdictions, with folks who are having a really tough time winding up. They're addicted to opioids. And we're trying to push cannabis situations out there where we're seeing that, you get a drastic reduction in the states that have legal cannabis now.
Yep.
You're finding the opposite of so much of what the fear-mongering from the officials is like, oh, my God, if we legalize this, all the kids are going to get it. And you find out that it's actually less access in those places. Once they know what it is and why it's doing what it does, it's less interesting, and it's not taboo anymore. It's not a taboo. People want to break taboos. It's not taboo. You're not going to break it.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
How do you see things, down the road? You see like there's a clinic and somebody's on opioids or they need to go to the clinic, or are we going to be just dialing down the production of opioids, or what can we do?
Oh, I don't think we'll dial down the production of opioids. People love them. A certain segment of the population, only a third of people actually get euphoric from opioids. But, and cannabis can kind of wallpaper over the withdrawal. It's about a week or 10 days, and they can be very useful for that. But in terms of the giving your life meaning and the NUE and all that, that's a very tricky problem, particularly in the downtown east side where there's poverty, mental illness, trauma. It's so entrenched. So it's going to take a lot to fix that problem.
Yeah. But at some point, though, like 20 years from now, let's say, let's give you benefit of the doubt and go for 20. So now it's 2038, 2040. And it's easily accessible to have someone guide you through some kind of psychedelic salvation for your lower based problem of addiction.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think ketamine could be used right now because it's already part of medicine, and
Right.
there's as far as I know, there's no ketamine clinics for depression or addiction in Canada, and it's a travesty.
And the ketamine helps you get off of other things?
You
Or
can do, yeah. For addiction, they started researching it out in Russia, at the time it was the Soviet Union. It was the last psychedelic research that was going on in the 80s. And there's a clinic in Florida called Ulysses that uses it.
okay.
And then there's some research going on in Britain, but Canada has really lagged behind on this one.
That's too bad. They do that so many times. I thought BC was going to be like, Operation Central, but it's kind of strange now with cannabis and all these American giant corporations. It's going to be all owned by one hedge fund soon, and then they're just going to bring in the Monsanto gene splitters to punk down all the great strains into something.
Don't say that. Well, the customer doesn't want that though. It's not like beans or rice or something. The customer wants cannabis the way they want it.
I guess so. I hope it stays on that track.
Hopefully.
Let's talk a little bit about your awarenesses. I keep dodging in and out of a poor network connection. It says, but I can hear you fine the whole time. Good thing we're not video. I wanted to ask about your awareness and direction and what you pulled out of. There's a book by Rick Strassman. This guy is an American, a very prominent researcher in the field of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, and you reference him in the book quite a bit, and you talk about that. What kinds of lessons did you pull out from Rick Strassman?
Well, the DMT stuff seems to be a lot about contact, the experience of connecting with some kind of external intelligence. And he actually, I think, maybe he ran the full DMT course, but he stopped doing research because these experiences were very disturbing. But another thing he did was he did a psilocybin session, and he let the subject have her cell phone. And so when she started to have a difficult experience, she called her boyfriend, who came and got her, and then he stopped doing research from there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and that, you don't let them have their cell phone. That's the lesson there.
Yeah, that's an awful thing. I've looked at the cell phone screen in an induced state, and it's just I want to put it down and get rid of it. It's probably a wise instinct.
Well, there might be trip advisors that you can get on your iPad or your iPhone with it before too long.
I guess so.
AIs that'll guide you through. Are you freaking out?
Are you freaking out? Go sit down over there. It's okay. Just take 10 minutes and go sit down over there. Yeah. So tell us about what your interpretation is of the DMT is spoken of by Rick Strassman as a God particle, if you will, at the risk of offending the CERN fans, and but the God essence, this thing. So, what is your impression, and maybe you believe this fully, and maybe you're just aware of Rick, but just break us down, because you must have studied this a bunch to be able to write your book. What is Rick's, or what is your take of Rick's take, or whatever, on what exactly is going on there with that molecule?
His argument is, and there's a lot of criticism of, but his argument is the pineal gland is formed over 49 days, and the pineal gland contains DMT. So when the pineal gland is formed, the DMT becomes active in the pineal gland, and the soul enters the body. This is kind of the metaphors that he's using. And in Buddhism, when someone dies, you pray over them for 49 days, and then the soul goes into another body. So, I mean, it's a nice idea. I don't know. I've heard there's a scientist, chemist called David Nichols at Purdue, and he says that the DMT in the brain isn't enough to actually be active.
Right.
So he disputes that. But as far as the subjective experience of communicating with an external entity, I have experienced that.
You've experienced that. Okay, tell us about that.
And if I hadn't experienced it, I would dismiss it outright, utterly, from anyone else.
Right. So you went through it, and you understand that if you were to tell someone this particular incident, that they're not going to believe it. You're not going to get frustrated at them for that.
No, for sure. Yeah,
okay, so there may be a few of them listening, but I know the substance of which you speak, and I'd be fascinated to hear your take. This, once again, we're speaking with Marcus Rummery. He's a comedian originally. Well, not originally. I mean, you were born originally, but he's a comedian from Ottawa, Canada. Moved to Vancouver. I've met him a few times, and now he has this fantastic book out called Shamanic Graffiti, and it's co-written with your. We're going to get to your some of the points in this book. The table of contents itself is a read on its own. So, tell us about Stan Groff.
Stan Groff?
Yeah.
So Stan Groff, in 1956, was a junior psychiatrist in Prague, Czechoslovakia, and he took a large dose of LSD and under the influence of a stroboscope, which was being used to entrain brainwaves. And he had an experience of cosmic consciousness, and then he became the preeminent LSD psychotherapist. And he gave it to, at the time, the experimental protocol was give it to everybody. Schizophrenics, obsessive compulsive, depression, bipolar, everybody, and see what happens. And what he noticed was that generally people would abreact or relive traumas from their biographical life, surgeries, accidents, abuse, neglect, that kind of stuff. Right. And then they would get better sometimes, usually, but he would keep going. And they would have more sessions, and then they would actually get worse in some ways, and they would have experiences that were even more troubling and difficult. And through this, he came up with this idea of the 4 basic perinatal matrices. So he organized these intense experiences into 4 sections, which are related to the 3 clinical phases of birth and the one preceding it. So the first one is bliss. Second one is despair. Third one is rage. And the fourth one is liberation.
Wow, and that's great. That's great. I mean, you keep going, but that's amazing stuff. I can't wait to take a look into this.
Mm-hmm. He's still out there. I just did a webinar course. I actually got to ask him a question on the webinar. He's the greatest. I mean, he's the inheritor of Freud and Jung, and he takes it and adds a lot to it, particularly this idea of the perinatal matrices. And then the third level is the transpersonal, which is like past lives, archetypes, becoming a plant, or becoming like all humanity, or these kinds of things.
Incredible. All right, yeah. So you have another chapter in the book called Listening to Acid. So on that note, I'll just dovetail it back into, tell us a little bit about what that means, listening to acid, and weave it back into my original question of your experiences of, all of that magical stuff. I believe you mentioned ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm. Well, listening to acid is a play on words of listening to Prozac. I was comparing a patient of Dr. Kramer who wrote Listening to Prozac, who was elderly, and they didn't want to give him Prozac because they were worried about his heart. And then one of the Hollywood Hospital flagship cases was this 75-year-old with depression who they gave LSD to, and he had a full many rebirth experiences, and was cured of his depression. So that was the kind of the juxtaposition with that. But as far as the ayahuasca experience, it was this kind of a standard issue, psychedelic, geometrical, undulating, colorful, stroboscopic, kaleidoscopic stuff. But there was a feeling of a presence, and it was though it was scanning my body and giving me the okay sign, because I'm a hypochondriac, and it wanted to tell me that everything was fine.
Or you think you are anyway.
Yeah, or you think, yeah. Just because I'm a hypochondriac doesn't mean I'm not sick.
Right. So it scans you. It
feels like it's scanning me, and it's saying, okay, everything's good. Don't worry about it.
Wow.
And it was a sense of this loving presence. And as I kind of locked into it, it was so grateful to see me in it. The more I reached towards it, the more it reached towards me. And it was like, it was a love beyond anything that I've experienced on this realm, really. It was different. So, yeah. And then it, went away, and I've never had anything like that under any circumstances.
And where was that?
That was in Whistler with a shaman from Peru. This guy Mike, who was like a Reiki master and a ayahuasquero and a black belt in karate.
Ooh, that's a good combination.
He was a badass.
Yeah, that sounds
and
great.
He, the ceremony is designed specifically to facilitate experiences like that.
Yeah. And how often have you done that? Many times, that particular?
I only did that once. I'd like to try it again, but
you're not.
But it's a bit of a secret society thing, and you got to really kind of work at it. And
I think that's worthwhile, though, because
Oh, for sure.
I got concerned about it years ago. When I first learned about it, it was at a certain level of general awareness. You could never get anyone to, they'd say, what? What are you talking about? And now more people know. And unfortunately, what's happened is that the genuine purveyors of many of these experiences, and when I don't mean your experience wasn't, but when you're down in South America in these places where they actually do it, you know, there's a certain sacrosanct rule that is called set and setting. And it's a big, big deal. But what's unfortunately happened is a lot of people have just, you know, like I'm afraid is what's happening with the cannabis industries. They just go, oh, this is cool. People want to come down here. They'll pay money to do it. Let's just drum up a bunch of shitty booze from some plants and tell people it's something. And people are getting ripped off, you know. It's proliferating. As soon as someone gets a good idea, here come the knockoffs is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Opportunists.
Yeah, opportunists.
You'll have cops that fought ayahuasca. Now they're opening an ayahuasca center because political winds have shifted.
Yeah, sure. The Julian Fantino ayahuasca center for pleasurable experiences. Oh my God.
Yeah, let's stay away from that.
So are you going to? Is there going to be another book from you? Are we going to get another one?
Yeah,
of these
I'm working on the Shamanic Future trilogy. So the second book is Shamanic Enneagram: Change Your Life with the Number 9.
The number 9. Tell us about that.
It's a science fiction self-help novel.
Okay.
And I actually just did a seminar on the Enneagram of personality, which is this system of 9 personality types. And you have to, as each type has to become like a different type. So for instance, I'm a 4 and I need to become like a 1. And a 1 is rational, principled, orderly, and disciplined. So it's a personality type that actually gives you a direction, not just a diagnosis kind of.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm really happy with this. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get further into it, but this is just judging by what I was able to dive into, several pages from several of the chapters. How's that for honesty? I didn't read the. Well, I read it up to a certain point, but I only got a hold of it on Sunday, unfortunately.
But the way I wrote it is there's a headline to each chapter and each experience, and you can actually just read those.
Right, but I heartily endorse the book for sure. But I mean, I picked some of the things out of there. But yeah, great chapter titles, and you're really going to find out a lot of interesting things here, folks. What I like about it is that it's a manual for a pathway of creativity and awareness that is completely valid, has tons of research in it, and barely anyone is talking about it right now as a thing. It's a whole other way of being. I so much want to spend more time in these avenues of thought than what did Trump say about this thing and who wore what at the Oscars. I'm so tired of these regular tropes, I guess, and it's from the it's from the mind expansiveness that you use that comes to you when you start experimenting with these things. I think that's the basic. Would you say that's the basic fear that the rulers have? The more people start to figure these things out, the less, like I said earlier, like are we less governable because more people know these things?
Absolutely, I think, and they've shown that people who have psychedelic experiences are more open. And I think that they are. You know, there's in the '60s they were afraid of that. Now I don't know if they're really even thinking about it very much.
Yeah. I don't know what they're doing, really. I just don't want them to get in the way of what I'm doing. That's all.
Exactly. But we'll find out. I mean, I've certainly, gone about my day for 44 years without incident. And
yeah.
They don't seem to be oppressing me.
Exactly. So, okay, well, we'll have to move on to another chat with you, Marcus. Absolutely. So here's the book again, Shamanic Graffiti, 100,000 Years of Drugs, 100 Years of Prohibition with Frank Ogden. You'll be back on sometime. Well, I will have read the book by then fully, and we will go into some other details and perhaps hear about your next venture. Where can folks reach you?
I am at therummery.ca. I have an author page on Facebook, Marcus Rummery.
Yes.
And I'm at the Rummery at Twitter.
The Rummery at Twitter. That's 2 M's, folks. Thank you very much, Marcus, for coming on and enlightening us with your enlightening book. It's really worth picking up. Take a look at it. Shamanic Graffiti. Thanks a bunch.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. That is Marcus Rummery from Vancouver, folks. He is a researcher of which not everybody can do that kind of thing. You know, you can't not everybody is designed to go down these avenues, but I'm glad people with this capacity, such as he, will go that far. I'm kind of keeping it tight to the cannabis v. cancer fight right now. And we still have a bit of show left. We have a few things that I have to get to, and one of them is we had a box from Wegmans. Is that it? Wegman, J.E. Wegmans. We had a box. It was called a ritual box. A ritual box. Make up your own jokes. We have a ritual box, and we need to give it away. And we had a contest going. We have another contest right now for Sam Malachi's book. But right now, let's see who the winner is. I'm going to reach into the drum. And this is like, pretend I'm reaching into the drum. Everything is virtual on the internet, okay? So I'm reaching into the big drum, and it turns out the name of the winner of the James E. Wagner. Remember, it's Wagner, actually. James E. Wagner we had a guest in a couple of weeks ago, and you'll remember his name is the winner's name. Now that's the winner's name. Get out of here. You're messing me up.